The summer sun beat down on the cobblestone plaza outside Buckingham Palace, as thousands of tourists gathered for the daily changing of the guard ceremony. Among the crowd was the Mitchell family from Texas enjoying their first trip to London. Mark Mitchell, a real estate agent, stood with his wife Sarah and their two children, 12-year-old Tyler and 8-year-old Emma. Tyler was glued to his phone, barely looking up at the magnificent palace or the guards in their iconic red uniforms and tall bearskin caps. He was more interested in recording videos for his social media followers back home. His parents had warned him multiple times during the trip about being respectful, but Tyler thought he knew better. After all, he had over 10,000 followers on his platform, and they loved his edgy content. The ceremony began with military precision. The guards marched in perfect formation, their boots clicking against the stones in perfect rhythm. Most tourists watched in respectful silence, captivated by the tradition that had continued for centuries. But Tyler saw an opportunity. He noticed one particular guard standing completely still at his post, eyes fixed straight ahead, not moving a muscle despite the heat and the pressing crowd. Tyler nudged his younger sister. "Watch this, Emma. These guys are like robots. I bet I can make him laugh or move." Emma looked worried and whispered that their mom would be angry, but Tyler ignored her. He had already started recording on his phone. At first, Tyler just made faces at the guard, pulling silly expressions and sticking out his tongue. The guard, whose name was Lance Corporal James Hawthorne, remained perfectly still. James was a veteran with 8 years of service, including 2 tours in Afghanistan. He had been trained to maintain his composure no matter what happened around him. But he was also human, and he could see everything happening in front of him. When making faces didn't work, Tyler got bolder. He started doing a mocking march in front of the guard, mimicking the way the soldiers walked. A few tourists nearby chuckled nervously, but many looked uncomfortable. Sarah Mitchell finally noticed what her son was doing and called out to him, but Tyler pretended not to hear her in the noise of the crowd. Then Tyler crossed a line. He stepped closer to the guard and said loudly, "Hey, toy soldier, are you even real? What a stupid job, just standing there like a statue. My little sister could do this." He laughed at his own joke and held up his phone to capture the guard's reaction, expecting his followers would love this content. What Tyler didn't understand was that these weren't just ceremonial figures. They were active serving soldiers, real military personnel who had seen combat, lost friends in war, and dedicated their lives to serving their country. The uniform wasn't a costume, and the duty wasn't a performance for tourists. It was a position of honor, earned through years of service and sacrifice. James had dealt with countless disrespectful tourists over his years of service. He had been poked, prodded, had items thrown at him, and endured all manner of insults. The training was clear. Ignore everything, maintain position, stay professional. But something about this moment felt different. Maybe it was the heat of the day, or maybe it was because Tyler reminded him of the young recruits he used to train, kids who thought they knew everything about the world. The other guards nearby had noticed the situation. They couldn't break their stance either, but their eyes flickered toward James, silently acknowledging what was happening. The crowd's mood had shifted too. What started as a few nervous chuckles had turned into uncomfortable silence as people realized this young tourist was genuinely mocking a soldier. Tyler, encouraged by the attention he was getting, decided to amp things up even more. He reached out as if to touch the guard's uniform, though he stopped just short. "Come on, robot man, do something. This is so boring. What are you even guarding? Nobody cares about this old building anyway." His voice carried across the plaza, and now dozens of people were watching, many recording on their own phones. Sarah Mitchell finally pushed through the crowd and grabbed Tyler's arm. "That's enough. Stop this right now." Her face was red with embarrassment and anger. But Tyler jerked his arm away, irritated that his mother was ruining his video. "Mom, chill out. I'm just having fun. It's not like he's a real soldier or anything." Those words hung in the air like a slap. It's not like he's a real soldier. Mark Mitchell had finally caught up to his wife and son, having been delayed by holding Emma's hand through the thick crowd. He heard his son's last comment and his face darkened with fury. But before he could say anything, something unexpected happened. A woman standing near the front of the crowd stepped forward. She was elderly, probably in her late 70s, with silver hair and kind eyes that now blazed with indignation. She wore a simple dress and carried a worn leather handbag. She looked at Tyler with an expression that combined disappointment and fierce protective anger. "Young man," she said in a crisp British accent that somehow carried authority despite not being loud, "do you have any idea who you're speaking to?" Tyler looked at her, confused and annoyed at another interruption. "It's just some guard, lady, relax." The woman's eyes narrowed. "That some guard, as you call him, is Lance Corporal James Hawthorne. He served 2 tours in Afghanistan. He's been awarded the Military Cross for bravery under fire. He saved 3 of his fellow soldiers when their vehicle was hit by an explosive device, going back into danger while under enemy fire to pull them to safety. One of those soldiers was my grandson." The plaza went completely silent. Even Tyler stopped talking, his phone still recording but now forgotten in his lowered hand. The woman continued, her voice shaking slightly with emotion but never losing its strength. "These guards are not toys. They are not robots. They are heroes who have sacrificed more than you could possibly understand at your age. They stand here in honor, representing all those who serve and all those who have fallen. And you mock them for entertainment?" Tyler's face had gone pale. Around him, the crowd had transformed from passive observers to active witnesses, their expressions ranging from sympathy for the guard to clear disapproval of the young tourist. Some were nodding along with the woman's words. Others looked at Tyler with the same disappointment in their eyes. Sarah Mitchell had tears streaming down her face, whether from shame or sadness or anger. It was hard to tell. Mark Mitchell stood frozen, watching his son finally realize the gravity of what he had done. Emma tugged on her father's hand, whispering, "Daddy, is Tyler in big trouble?" But the most powerful moment came next, something none of them expected, something that would change everything about how Tyler understood respect, duty, and the weight of his own actions. James Hawthorne had remained perfectly still throughout the entire confrontation, his eyes fixed on the horizon as protocol demanded. But inside, the elderly woman's defense of him and his fellow soldiers had stirred something deep. He thought of his mates from Afghanistan, the ones who hadn't made it home, the ones whose families would never see them stand guard at any palace, never see them marry, or have children, or grow old. The woman wasn't finished. She opened her worn leather handbag and pulled out a photograph, faded and creased from being carried for years. She held it up for Tyler and the surrounding crowd to see. It showed a young soldier in desert camouflage, grinning at the camera, his arm around Lance Corporal Hawthorne in the same dusty landscape. Both men looked impossibly young, their faces tanned and eyes squinting against the Afghan sun. "This is my grandson, David," she said, her voice softening, but still firm. "He was 23 when this photo was taken. That's him with Lance Corporal Hawthorne. David came home from that tour, but he came home different. The things he saw, the friends he lost, they changed him forever. He still wakes up screaming some nights. But he's alive because this man you just called a toy soldier risked everything to save him." Tyler wanted to disappear. His phone felt like it weighed 100 pounds in his hand. He could see his own reflection in the black screen, and he didn't like what he saw. His mother was crying openly now, and his father looked like he wanted to drag Tyler away from this plaza and never return to London. The woman stepped closer to Tyler, and despite her age and small stature, she seemed to tower over him. "I don't know what they teach children in your country about respect, but I hope you'll learn something today. These soldiers stand here in all weather, enduring heat and cold and rain, dealing with people like you. Because it's their duty. They represent something bigger than themselves. Can you say the same about anything you do?" Tyler shook his head, unable to find words. The woman's question had cut straight through all his social media bravado, all his teenage confidence, all his assumptions about the world. He genuinely couldn't think of a single thing he did that was bigger than himself. He posted videos online for likes and followers, but what did that really mean? What did it represent? Nothing. It was all just empty noise. Around them, the crowd had grown larger as people sensed something significant was happening. Other tourists had put away their cameras and phones, recognizing that this wasn't entertainment but a real moment of human interaction, of teaching and learning. Some of the British tourists nodded in approval at the woman's words. Several American tourists looked embarrassed, as if Tyler's behavior reflected poorly on all of them. A middle-aged man in the crowd called out, "The lad should apologize." Others murmured in agreement. The pressure on Tyler was mounting from all sides. His sister Emma was crying now too, upset by all the tension and the crowd's disapproval of her brother. Mark Mitchell finally found his voice and gripped Tyler's shoulder firmly. "Listen to me, son," Mark said, his voice low and serious in a way Tyler rarely heard. "You're going to make this right. I don't care about your phone, your followers, or your pride. You're going to apologize to this soldier, and you're going to mean it. Do you understand me?" Tyler nodded, tears starting to form in his own eyes. But how could he apologize? The guard couldn't respond, couldn't acknowledge him, couldn't accept or reject his apology. Tyler had learned enough in the past few minutes to know that trying to make the guard break his stance would be just another insult. He was trapped in a situation of his own making, with no clear way to fix it. The elderly woman seemed to sense his confusion. Her expression softened slightly, the fierce protectiveness giving way to something more like understanding. "What's your name, child?" she asked. "Tyler," he managed to say, his voice barely above a whisper. "Tyler, my name is Margaret Sinclair. I've lived in London my entire life, and I've been coming to watch the changing of the guard since I was younger than you are now. Do you know why?" Tyler shook his head. "Because it reminds me that there are still people in this world who believe in something, who stand for something, who will sacrifice for others. In a world that often seems selfish and cruel, these soldiers are a reminder of duty and honor." Margaret looked at the guard, her eyes full of gratitude and respect. "Lance Corporal Hawthorne can't speak to you right now because he's on duty, but I can tell you what he would probably say if he could. He would say that you're young and you made a mistake, and that the important thing is to learn from it. Soldiers fight for many things, but one of them is so that young people like you have the freedom to make mistakes and grow from them." Tyler felt the weight of her words settle over him like a blanket. She was giving him grace he didn't deserve, and somehow that made him feel even worse and better at the same time. He looked at the guard properly for the first time, really, seeing him as a person rather than an object or a curiosity. He saw the sweat on the man's brow from standing in the heat, the slight tension in his jaw from maintaining perfect stillness, the dedication required to stay so disciplined despite distractions. "I'm sorry," Tyler said, looking directly at the guard even though he knew he wouldn't get a response. "I'm really sorry. I was being stupid and disrespectful and I didn't understand. I'm sorry for what I said and for how I acted." The plaza remained quiet, everyone waiting to see what would happen next. Lance Corporal Hawthorne gave no sign that he had heard. His eyes remained fixed forward, his posture unchanged, but something had shifted in the atmosphere. Margaret nodded approvingly at Tyler. "That's a start, young man. A good start." Sarah Mitchell had composed herself enough to speak. She addressed Margaret directly, her voice thick with emotion. "Thank you for taking the time to educate my son. We've been trying to teach him respect, but sometimes lessons need to come from outside the family. I'm so embarrassed by his behavior." Margaret waved away her apology. "Children push boundaries. It's what they do. The important thing is that they learn when they've pushed too far. Your son is learning that now." She turned back to Tyler. "What will you do with that video on your phone?" Tyler looked down at his phone, still recording. He had captured everything, including his own humiliation and the powerful words from this elderly woman. His first instinct was to delete it, to erase this embarrassing moment from existence. But then he thought about what Margaret had said about learning from mistakes. Maybe other kids needed to learn this lesson too. Maybe he could use his platform for something that actually mattered. "I'm going to post it," Tyler said slowly, thinking through his decision as he spoke. "All of it. Not to make fun or to get views, but to show people what I learned, to show them why these soldiers deserve respect." Margaret smiled for the first time, and it transformed her face, making her look younger and somehow lighter. "Now that," she said, "would be using your voice for good." The crowd slowly began to disperse as the ceremony continued around them, tourists returning their attention to the marching guards and the traditional changing of positions. But a small group remained near Tyler and his family, drawn by the emotional scene that had unfolded. Among them was a man in his early 50s wearing a military veteran's pin on his jacket. He had been watching the entire exchange with keen interest. The man approached the Mitchell family and introduced himself. "Name's Robert Chen. I'm a retired sergeant from the British Army, served 20 years before I took my pension. I couldn't help but overhear what happened here." He looked at Tyler with an expression that wasn't angry but was certainly serious. "Young man, you got off easy today. There are places in the world where disrespecting a soldier could land you in serious trouble. But more importantly, you disrespected something you clearly don't understand." Mark Mitchell extended his hand to shake Robert's. "We're grateful for the lesson, even though it came the hard way. Tyler has been difficult about showing respect for things outside his immediate world. This trip was supposed to help broaden his perspective." He looked at his son with a mixture of disappointment and hope. "I think it's starting to work, just not the way we planned." Robert nodded thoughtfully. Sometimes the best lessons come from unexpected places. He turned his full attention to Tyler. "Can I ask you something? What do you want to be when you grow up? What's your dream?" Tyler was caught off guard by the question. After everything that had just happened, talking about his future seemed strange. But he answered honestly, "I don't really know. Maybe something with social media or video production. I like creating content and connecting with people online." "That's not a bad dream," Robert said, surprising Tyler. "The world needs people who can communicate and reach others. But let me ask you another question. If you want to create content and connect with people, what message do you want to send? What do you want people to remember about you?" Tyler had never really thought about it that deeply. He made videos because they were fun, because people liked them, because it felt good to get attention. But what was he actually saying with those videos? What did they add to the world? He looked at the ground, unable to answer. Robert continued, his voice gentle but firm. "These guards, like Lance Corporal Hawthorne over there, they've chosen to stand for something. They represent their country, their regiment, their fallen comrades. Every time they put on that uniform, they're saying something about duty, honor, and service. What does your content say about you?" The question hit Tyler like a physical blow. He realized that his video said he was someone who would do anything for attention, who didn't think about consequences, who valued likes and followers over kindness and respect. Is that really who he wanted to be? Is that the legacy he wanted to leave? Margaret, who had stayed nearby during this conversation, added her own thoughts. "When I was your age, we didn't have all this technology you have now. We couldn't reach thousands of people with a single video. But that means you have something we never had, Tyler. You have power. Real power to influence and educate. The question is what you'll do with it." Emma, Tyler's little sister, tugged on his sleeve. She had stopped crying and now looked up at her brother with her big brown eyes. "Tyler, I thought those guards were cool. I wanted to be respectful like Mom and Dad taught us." "Why weren't you?" Out of everything that had happened, his little sister's innocent question hurt the most. Emma looked up to him, whether he deserved it or not. She watched what he did and learned from his example. What kind of example had he been showing her? That rules didn't matter? That being rude was funny? That respect was just something adults talked about but didn't really mean? "I messed up, Emma," Tyler said, kneeling down to her level. "I was trying to be cool for my videos, but I forgot to actually be a good person. These guards are cool. They're like real-life heroes, and I was mean to them. I'm going to do better, okay?" Emma hugged him tightly. "Okay. I still love you even when you mess up." Sarah Mitchell wiped away fresh tears, these ones from pride in the growth she was witnessing in her son. The day had been mortifying, but maybe it was exactly what their family needed. Sometimes the universe had a way of delivering lessons at the perfect moment, even if they came wrapped in embarrassment and shame. Robert checked his watch and gestured toward the guard. "The changing of the guard ceremony will be ending soon. Lance Corporal Hawthorne will be relieved from his post in about 10 minutes. If you wait, you might have a chance to speak with him properly, face to face, man to man." Tyler's heart raced at the suggestion. Speaking to the guard directly, without the protection of his phone or the anonymity of the crowd, was terrifying, but it was also the right thing to do. The apology he had given earlier felt incomplete because he couldn't look the man in the eye and really mean it, couldn't have a conversation and truly understand what he had done. "Would he even want to talk to me?" Tyler asked uncertainly. "After what I did?" Margaret smiled. "James is a good man. I've met him several times when visiting my grandson. He understands that people make mistakes, But more importantly, he appreciates when people take responsibility for those mistakes. I think he'd respect you more for facing him directly than for running away." The Mitchell family decided to wait. The remaining minutes of the ceremony felt like hours to Tyler. He watched the guards complete their duties with newfound appreciation, seeing the precision and dedication that went into every movement. These weren't just random people in costumes. They were professionals executing centuries-old traditions with pride and skill. When the ceremony concluded, the guards who had been on display marched off in formation. Lance Corporal Hawthorne was relieved from his post and, as protocol demanded, he first went inside to complete his duties before he could interact with the public. Margaret assured them he would come back out, and that they should wait near the designated area where guards sometimes spoke briefly with visitors after their shifts. 20 minutes later, James Hawthorne emerged in a slightly more relaxed posture, though he still maintained his military bearing. He was no longer required to stand at attention, and his face, which had been so stoic before, now showed the strain of having stood motionless in the summer heat for an extended period. Margaret immediately approached him with a warm smile. "James, dear, how are you? That was quite a shift you had," she said fondly. "Mrs. Sinclair, lovely to see you as always," James replied with a slight smile. His voice was warm and carried a slight northern accent. "Heard every word you said earlier. Couldn't show it at the time, but thank you for speaking up." "Of course, dear. David speaks so highly of you, always has. But there's someone here who would like to speak with you, if you have a moment." She gestured toward Tyler and his family. James looked at Tyler directly for the first time, and Tyler felt the full weight of that gaze. These were eyes that had seen things no teenager could imagine, eyes that had witnessed war and loss and sacrifice. They weren't cruel or angry, but they were knowing, able to see straight through any pretense or false bravado. Tyler stepped forward, his parents behind him for support but letting him handle this himself. This was his mistake to address, his responsibility to own. He took a deep breath and began to speak, knowing that whatever he said in the next few minutes would matter more than any video he had ever posted. Tyler felt his mouth go dry as he stood before Lance Corporal James Hawthorne. All the words he had practiced in his head during the wait suddenly evaporated. He fumbled with his phone, putting it in his pocket to show this conversation wouldn't be recorded, that this was real and personal, not content for strangers to consume. "Sir, my name is Tyler Mitchell and I owe you an apology," he began, his voice cracking slightly. "What I did earlier was completely wrong. I was disrespectful and ignorant, and I said things that I didn't understand. I called you names and mocked your job, and I'm really, truly sorry." James studied Tyler for a long moment, his expression neutral. The silence stretched on, and Tyler felt sweat that had nothing to do with the temperature forming on his forehead. Finally, James spoke, his voice measured and calm. "I appreciate your apology, Tyler. It takes courage to face someone you've wronged, especially in front of your family." He paused, then continued, "But I have a question for you. Are you sorry because you got caught and called out by Mrs. Sinclair here? Or are you sorry because you genuinely understand why what you did was wrong?" The question was fair, and Tyler knew James deserved an honest answer. He thought carefully before responding. "When I first got called out, I was just embarrassed and scared. I wanted everyone to stop looking at me, but the more I listened to Mrs. Sinclair and the veteran who talked to me, the more I started to actually understand. You're not just some guy in a uniform standing around. You've done real things, brave things, things that matter. And I made fun of that for internet likes. That's pathetic." James's expression softened slightly. "I won't lie to you, son. What you did out there was disrespectful. Not just to me, but to everyone who serves or has served. But you know what? You're 12 years old. I've seen grown adults do worse, and they don't apologize at all. At least you're here, facing up to it." Mark Mitchell stepped forward. "Lance Corporal, if I may, I want to apologize as well. My son's behavior reflects on how his mother and I have raised him, and clearly we've failed to instill proper respect for those who serve." "We're going to do better." James shook his head. "With respect, sir, you're being too hard on yourself. Parenting in today's world with social media and instant gratification can't be easy. The fact that your son is here apologizing tells me you've taught him something important, even if he forgot it for a moment. He knows the difference between right and wrong. He just needs to remember to apply it even when no one's watching." Sarah Mitchell wiped her eyes again. "Thank you for your understanding. And thank you for your service. My father was in the military Marines, and I grew up with that culture of respect. I should have passed that on more clearly to Tyler. Marines are good people, James said with a slight smile. They certainly know how to march. The small joke broke some of the tension, and even Tyler managed a weak smile. Robert Chen, who had stayed nearby, now joined the conversation. James, I was just telling young Tyler here about the power of using his platform responsibly. He's got quite a following on social media, apparently. Maybe he can turn this experience into something positive. James looked at Tyler with renewed interest. A following? How many people watch your videos? About 10,000 subscribers, Tyler admitted, feeling less proud of that number than he had been just hours before. I mostly do comedy stuff and pranks. At least that's what I thought I was doing. Now I'm not so sure it's actually funny. 10,000 people, James repeated thoughtfully. That's roughly the size of 2 military battalions. That's a lot of people paying attention to what you say and do. What do you think you're teaching them? Tyler had no good answer. What was he teaching them? To be disrespectful for laughs? To ignore boundaries for content? To value attention over character? He felt ashamed all over again. James must have seen the distress on Tyler's face because his tone became gentler. Look, there's nothing wrong with wanting to make people laugh or creating entertaining content. The world needs joy and humor, but there's a difference between being funny and being cruel, between entertaining people and hurting them. The best content creators I've seen online are the ones who lift people up, not tear them down. How do you know about content creators? Tyler asked, surprised. James laughed. I'm a soldier, not a caveman. We use social media in the military too. I've got mates who do amazing videos about military life, educating people about what we do, showing the human side of service. They've got huge followings because they're authentic and respectful. That's what people really respond to, not cheap shots and mockery. Margaret added, my grandson David has struggled with his recovery from his trauma, but one thing that's helped him is watching videos from veterans who share their experiences honestly. It helps him feel less alone. Content like that can genuinely change lives, Tyler. Your platform could do something similar. An idea was forming in Tyler's mind. What if I did a series about respect? Not like a boring lecture, but real stories from real people about why respect matters. I could interview veterans, teachers, emergency responders, people who serve others. I could show my followers what real heroes look like. Emma tugged on Tyler's arm excitedly. That would be so cool. And you could teach kids like me about history and bravery and stuff. James nodded approvingly. Now that's using your platform for good. If you're serious about it, I'd be willing to sit down for an interview sometime. Talk about what service means, why traditions like the Queen's Guard matter. Not for glory, but to educate. Mrs. Sinclair, maybe your David would be willing as well. Margaret's eyes lit up. I think he might be. It could be therapeutic for him to share his story with young people who need to hear it. And Tyler, dear, if you're genuine about this, I could connect you with several veterans in London who have remarkable stories to share. Tyler felt something shift inside him, like a door opening to a new way of seeing the world. He had come to London as a kid obsessed with going viral, with getting attention, with being internet famous for 15 minutes. But maybe he could be known for something better. Maybe he could use his voice to honor people who deserved honor, to educate instead of mock, to build up instead of tear down. I want to start with you, Tyler said to James. Not today, because you've been standing in the heat for hours and you probably want to go home. But before we leave London, could we set something up? A real conversation about your service and what it means to you. James extended his hand and Tyler shook it firmly. You've got yourself a deal, Tyler. Give me your email address and I'll be in touch to arrange something. And Tyler? James looked at him seriously. Make sure you're doing this for the right reasons. Don't do it just to fix your reputation or to get new followers. Do it because you genuinely want to make a difference. I will, Tyler promised, and for the first time that day he felt like himself again. Not the show-off kid trying to impress strangers online, but the real Tyler underneath all that. The Tyler who is capable of learning, growing, and maybe even making a positive impact on the world. 3 days later, the Mitchell family met James Hawthorne at a quiet cafe near Hyde Park. James arrived in civilian clothes, jeans, and a simple button-down shirt, looking remarkably different from the stoic guard in the red uniform. He was younger than Tyler had imagined, probably in his early 30s. with kind eyes and an easy smile that suggested he wasn't the stern soldier Tyler had built up in his mind. Tyler had spent those 3 days thinking deeply about what he wanted to ask, what he wanted to learn, and most importantly, what message he wanted to share with his followers. He had drafted questions, deleted them, and started over multiple times. His parents had watched this process with quiet pride, seeing their son take something seriously for perhaps the first time in his life. They settled into a corner booth where Tyler could set up his phone on a small tripod. But before he started recording, James held up his hand. "Before we begin, I want to set some ground rules. I'll answer your questions honestly, but there are some things I can't talk about for security reasons. I also won't glorify war or violence. What I will talk about is service, duty, and what it means to be part of something bigger than yourself. Does that work for you?" "Absolutely," Tyler said, nodding seriously. "I want this to be respectful and educational. I promise I won't sensationalize anything or try to make it into something it's not." James smiled. "Good man. Then let's begin." Tyler started recording and took a deep breath. "Hi everyone, Tyler here. Today's video is different from anything I've ever posted before. A few days ago I did something I'm not proud of. I disrespected a royal guard at Buckingham Palace, mocking him and calling him names while he was on duty. I was wrong, completely wrong. And I'm making this video to not only apologize publicly, but to help all of us understand why respect matters." He gestured to James. "This is Lance Corporal James Hawthorne, the guard I disrespected. He agreed to sit down with me today to share his story. James, thank you for giving me this chance." "Thanks for having me, Tyler. And thank you for being brave enough to admit your mistakes publicly. That's not easy to do." Tyler asked his first question, his voice steady despite his nerves. "Can you tell us about what made you want to join the military?" James leaned back, thinking. "I grew up in a small town in Yorkshire. My dad was a factory worker. My mum was a nurse. We didn't have much money, but we had a good life. When I was 17, I saw a documentary about British soldiers helping communities in Afghanistan, building schools and protecting people. It showed the hardship, sure, but it also showed purpose. These soldiers weren't just fighting. They were making a real difference in people's lives. I wanted to be part of that." "What was basic training like?" Tyler asked, genuinely curious now. "Brutal," James laughed. "They break you down completely and build you back up as part of a team. You learn that you're not special, that your comfort doesn't matter, that the mission and your mates come first. It sounds harsh, but it's necessary. In combat, there's no room for ego or selfishness. You have to trust the person next to you completely, and they have to trust you. That only happens when everyone is trained to the same standard and shares the same values." Tyler's next question was harder to ask. "Mrs. Sinclair told me you saved her grandson David and 2 other soldiers when your vehicle was hit. Can you talk about that day?" James's expression grew more serious, and for a moment Tyler worried he had pushed too far. But then James spoke, his voice quieter but firm. "It was during my second tour. We were on patrol, and the vehicle in front of us hit an improvised explosive device. The blast was massive. For a few seconds everything was chaos. Smoke, screaming, confusion. My training kicked in before my brain even fully processed what happened." He paused, gathering his thoughts. 3 lads were in that vehicle. The driver was killed instantly. Nothing anyone could do for him. But the other 3 were alive, trapped in the wreckage with ammunition cooking off and fuel everywhere. The vehicle could have exploded at any second. We had to get them out." "You went back in?" Tyler asked, his eyes wide. "We all did. Me and 2 others from my squad. You don't think about the danger in those moments. You just think about your mates. David had a broken leg and couldn't move. Another lad was unconscious, bleeding badly. We pulled them out one by one while under sporadic enemy fire. The 3rd soldier, Tommy, he was awake and terrified. I'll never forget the look in his eyes. I told him I'd get him out, that I promised. And we did." Sarah Mitchell, listening from nearby, had tears streaming down her face. Even Mark had to look away for a moment, overwhelmed by the weight of what James was describing. Tyler's voice was thick with emotion when he asked his next question. "How do you go from experiences like that to standing guard at a palace while tourists walk by? Doesn't it feel?" "I don't know. Pointless after everything you've been through?" James shook his head firmly. "It's not pointless at all. Standing guard at the royal palaces is an honor that's earned through service. It represents the continuity of the British military, the traditions we uphold, the sacrifices of those who came before us. When I put on that uniform and stand at my post, I'm not just standing there. I'm representing every soldier who ever wore the uniform, including the ones who didn't come home. He leaned forward, making direct eye contact with Tyler. And here's something else. Kids come to see us every day, little ones who are just learning about bravery and duty and service. They see us standing there, disciplined and dedicated, and maybe it plants a seed. Maybe someday one of those kids will remember and decide to serve others in some way. Whether in the military or as a teacher or a doctor or a firefighter, we're living examples of commitment. That's not small or pointless. That's profound. Tyler hadn't thought about it that way. He'd seen the guards as relics, as tourist attractions, as living statues. He'd never considered that they might be inspiring the next generation, showing children what dedication looked like in a world that often valued instant gratification over sustained commitment. What would you say to young people watching this who want to make a difference but don't know how? Tyler asked. James smiled. Start where you are. You don't have to join the military to serve others. Volunteer in your community. Stand up for someone being bullied. Help your elderly neighbor with their groceries. Respect people even when it's not easy or convenient. Every act of service matters, no matter how small it seems. And Tyler, what you're doing right now, using your platform to educate and promote respect, that's service too. Tyler felt a lump in his throat. He had started this interview thinking he was doing James a favor by giving him a platform to share his story. But really, James was doing Tyler the favor by taking the time to teach him something essential about character and purpose. They talked for another hour, covering everything from the bonds between soldiers to how James dealt with the mental challenges of combat to what life was like for military families. Emma joined them for a bit, asking her own innocent but profound questions about whether James was ever scared and whether being brave meant never feeling fear. Being brave doesn't mean you're not afraid, James told her gently. It means you do the right thing even when you are afraid. Everyone feels fear, Emma. It's what you do with that fear that matters. When they finally finished, Tyler felt exhausted in a good way, like he'd just completed something important. James shook his hand warmly and said something that Tyler would remember for the rest of his life. You're going to make mistakes, Tyler. Everyone does. But you've learned something valuable. You've learned that your actions have consequences, that your words carry weight, and that you have the power to hurt or to heal. Use that knowledge wisely. Tyler spent the flight back to Texas editing the interview footage. He agonized over every cut, every transition, making sure James's words came through clearly and respectfully. He also included the original footage from the plaza, the footage of his own disrespectful behavior, and the confrontation with Margaret Sinclair. It was humiliating to watch himself act that way, but he knew it was important to show the full story. When he finally posted the video, titled "I Disrespected a War Hero and Here's What I Learned," he wrote a long description explaining everything that had happened and why he was sharing this story. He acknowledged his mistakes fully, thanked Margaret and James for teaching him a valuable lesson, and challenged his followers to think about how they treat people, especially those who serve others. Then he waited. The response was immediate and overwhelming. In the first hour, the video received thousands of views. Tyler watched nervously as comments poured in, expecting many of them to be harsh or mocking. After all, he had exposed his own worst behavior to the world. But to his surprise, most comments were supportive and thoughtful. Respect for admitting your mistakes publicly. That takes real courage. This made me cry. My dad is a veteran and people don't understand what he sacrificed. I was going to visit London next month and probably would have done something similar. Thank you for teaching me better. This is the best content you've ever posted. More of this, please. Of course, there were negative comments too. Some people called him a fake, said he was only apologizing because he got caught. Others said he was too young and stupid to understand anything about the real world. A few trolls made jokes about the entire situation, but Tyler had learned something important. He couldn't control how everyone reacted. He could only control his own actions and intentions. His follower count actually dropped at first. About 2,000 people unsubscribed, apparently preferring his old prank content. But then something unexpected happened. New subscribers started joining, people who appreciated the authenticity and the message. Within a week, he had gained back the lost followers and added 5,000 more. Other content creators reached out, some to congratulate him on his maturity, others to ask if they could collaborate on similar educational content. A veterans organization in the United States contacted him about potentially partnering on a series of videos, highlighting different aspects of military service. A high school teacher wrote to tell him she had shown the video to her class and it had sparked an amazing discussion about respect and responsibility, but the message that meant the most came 2 weeks after posting the video. It was an email from Margaret Sinclair with a photo attached. The photo showed her grandson David sitting with a group of young veterans at a support meeting. Margaret wrote that after seeing Tyler's video, David had been inspired to start sharing his own story with schools and youth groups. He had been hesitant to talk about his experiences before, worried about being judged or pitied. But seeing a 12-year-old take responsibility and turn a mistake into a teaching moment had given him courage. "You helped my grandson find his voice again," Margaret wrote. "Thank you for being brave enough to learn and to change. The world needs more people willing to admit when they're wrong and to grow from it. James was right about you. You're going to be just fine." Tyler read that email 3 times, tears streaming down his face. He had started this journey as a kid trying to go viral, trying to get attention and laughs at someone else's expense. Now he was part of something bigger. He had actually made a difference in someone's life, had helped a veteran feel empowered to share his story. That felt more valuable than 1 million followers. Back at school in Texas, Tyler faced his own challenges. Some kids thought his video was cool and respected what he'd done. Others teased him for apologizing, calling him soft or a sellout. A few kids accused him of faking the whole thing for views. Tyler found these reactions hurtful, but he also understood them. He had been exactly like those kids just weeks before, valuing toughness over vulnerability, cynicism over sincerity. One afternoon, a kid named Marcus approached Tyler at lunch. Marcus was known as the class bully, someone who made fun of everyone and seemed to take pride in being mean. "So you're a soldier lover now?" Marcus sneered. "Making videos kissing up to people in costumes?" Tyler felt the old instinct to respond with anger or defensiveness. But then he thought about James standing perfectly still while being mocked, maintaining his dignity and composure. He thought about Margaret speaking up not with anger but with powerful truth. He took a breath and responded calmly. "They're not costumes, Marcus. They're uniforms. And yeah, I made a video about respecting people who risk their lives for others. If that makes me a soldier lover, I'm okay with that." Marcus seemed surprised by Tyler's calm response. "Whatever, man. It's just weird seeing you all serious and stuff." "I'm still me," Tyler said. "I still like to have fun and make people laugh. I just realized there's a difference between funny and cruel. James, the guard I interviewed, he taught me that you can be entertaining without tearing people down. That's harder to do, but it's better." To Tyler's surprise, Marcus sat down at the table. "That video actually made me think about some stuff. My uncle was in the Army. He doesn't talk about it much. Maybe I should ask him about it sometime." "You should," Tyler encouraged. "Everyone has a story worth hearing if you take the time to listen." Emma had noticed the changes in her brother too. She told their parents that Tyler was nicer now, that he helped her with homework without complaining, that he actually listened when she talked instead of just staring at his phone. Sarah and Mark saw it too. Their son was growing up, developing empathy and awareness that would serve him well throughout his life. Tyler continued making videos but with a new focus. He still did comedy and entertainment, but he balanced it with interviews and educational content. He talked to firefighters about bravery, teachers about dedication, nurses about compassion. He featured people in his own community who were making a difference in quiet, unglamorous ways. His style evolved too. He became known for his authenticity, his willingness to show vulnerability and admit when he didn't know something. Young people responded to this honesty. They were tired of perfectly curated images and fake personalities. Tyler's realness, including his willingness to show his mistakes and growth, connected with them. 6 months after the London trip, Tyler received a package from James. Inside was a Royal Guard cap badge, the symbol worn by the guards at Buckingham Palace. The note with it read, "Tyler, this is a spare badge for my uniform. I want you to have it as a reminder that everyone makes mistakes, but not everyone learns from them. You did. Keep using your voice for good. Keep showing people what real strength looks like. And remember, being brave sometimes means admitting you were wrong." You've already shown that kind of bravery. I'm proud of you. Stay true to yourself. James. Tyler placed the badge on his desk where he could see it every time he made a video. It became his reminder of the day his life changed. The day he learned that respect wasn't just a word adults threw around, but a real value that shaped how you moved through the world. Years later, when people asked Tyler about the moment that changed his life, he always told them about the day a royal guard stood silent while a kid mocked him, about an elderly woman who spoke truth with fierce love, about a veteran who showed him what real strength looked like, and about a little sister whose innocent question cut to the heart of everything that mattered. He told them about the day he stopped trying to be famous and started trying to be good, and that made all the difference.